Imagine a world where the militaries of every single nation have just been completely dissolved.
Right, just totally gone overnight.
Yeah, exactly. And the major rivers of the Earth are physically plumbed together into this massive, planetary water grid.
Which is an insane engineering concept.
It is. And, playing, soccer or baseball as an adult, that is considered a dangerous threat to global peace and is strictly prohibited.
Wow. Yeah, no more Sunday Night Football.
Exactly. So today, we aren't talking about the plot of some weird sci-fi novel. We are asking a really massive, highly pragmatic question.
Right, which is, what would a literal blueprint for absolute permanent world peace actually look like?
Yes. Not just, vague wishful thinking. We're looking at a highly specific, systematic 14-point manifesto.
And it covers literally everything, from global economics and quantum magnetism to the underlying mathematics of the patriarchy.
It's wild. So welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We are exploring a translated text that outlines a philosophy called Vethathiri.
Yeah, which is this incredibly comprehensive social blueprint. It was developed by Vethathiri Maharishi.
Right, who is referred to in the text as Arutperum. And our mission today is to unpack these 14 principles, really understand the complex logic connecting them.
And see exactly how this thinker envisioned restructuring the human experience literally from the ground up.
Yeah. But before we jump into the architecture of this utopia, we need to establish some ground rules for our discussion today.
That is extremely important, yeah.
Right.
Because this text contains highly provocative, utopian, and honestly, occasionally radical ideas regarding how governments should operate.
And capitalism and the fundamental structures of world religions.
Right. So we want to be abundantly clear to you, the listener, that we are not taking sides here.
Nope, not at all.
We are not endorsing these viewpoints. Our goal today is strictly analytical. We are impartially reporting on this fascinating philosophical framework to convey the exact ideas contained in the original source material.
We just lay out the logic, and you evaluate it. Okay, let's unpack this. Any good doctor will tell you that, well, you can't prescribe a cure until you've properly diagnosed the disease, right?
Right, exactly.
And the preamble of this text acts as this massive diagnostic scan of human society. It argues that there are 7 current conditions, things we just accept as normal daily life, that make permanent world peace mathematically and socially impossible.
Yeah, the text claims that if these 7 things exist, peace simply cannot.
So what is the first underlying disease on this list?
Well, the very first condition is divided political borders.
Okay, borders.
Yeah, the text argues that as long as humanity is fractured into sovereign nations with, different political systems and arbitrary lines drawn in the dirt, conflict is just the inevitable baseline state of the world.
It's like treating the Earth's surface like a jigsaw puzzle of fenced-in yards, rather than a single undivided game board.
Yeah, it is the perfect way to visualize it. And that actually leads directly into the second condition, which is the private ownership of the Earth.
Wait, like real estate?
Exactly. The philosophy frames the Earth as nature's capital. It argues that land wasn't manufactured by humanity, right?
Right, obviously.
So claiming exclusive ownership over pieces of the planet, which is essentially the foundational concept of real estate, it guarantees that humans will fight over it.
Man, that is a staggering paradigm shift right out of the gate. We take real estate as an absolute given.
Totally.
But the text is saying that putting a price tag on dirt is a root cause of human suffering. So what's the third condition?
The third condition challenges the concept of inherited wealth over societal welfare.
Inherited wealth, okay.
Yeah, the text states that the idea of a person's efforts and wealth belonging exclusively to them and their specific heirs, rather than being utilized for the broader society, is a, and I quote, fictional system.
A fictional system? Why?
Yeah, it views generational wealth hoarding as this mechanic that perpetually manufactures inequality.
And calling inheritance a fictional system forces you to really step back.
Yeah.
I mean, we act like passing down a fortune is a law of physics.
Right, like gravity.
Yeah, but this text points out that it's just a societal rule we invented, and one that concentrates power at the expense of everyone else. What's number 4?
The fourth condition is equally structural, but it deals with the family unit.
Okay.
The text argues that putting the burden of childcare and elder care solely on individual isolated families is a massive barrier to societal peace.
Because it places immense, unsustainable pressure on individuals.
Exactly.
I can hear every stressed out, exhausted parent and caregiver listening right now, letting out a deep sigh. I mean, the nuclear family as an isolated economic and caregiving unit is just incredibly taxing.
It really is.
If society doesn't share that burden, the baseline of human existence is just endless stress.
Okay, what about the fifth condition?
Moving to the fifth, the text points to unemployment. But it doesn't view unemployment as like a mere economic metric.
How does it view it?
It states that as long as society fails to guarantee appropriate physical and intellectual work for all able-bodied youth and adults, we are actively breeding instability. So unemployment is a structural failure of the system, not a personal failure of the citizen.
Precisely. And the sixth condition takes that failure to its most extreme logical conclusion.
Which is?
The text argues that if the global administration is run in such a way that even a single human being anywhere on Earth starves to death, the entire system is fundamentally broken and invalid.
A single human. That is an absolute zero-tolerance policy for poverty.
Yes.
We often talk about, acceptable margins of poverty in modern economics. This philosophy says there is no acceptable margin. And the final condition.
The seventh condition shifts our perspective from intraspecies conflict to our relationship with the rest of life on Earth.
Okay, how so?
The text states that as long as humans have the habit and the perceived necessity of killing other beings for food, permanent peace will remain out of reach.
Oh, wow. So eating meat is on the same level as global poverty. Let's synthesize this preamble. Divided borders, private land ownership, hoarding generational wealth, isolated family caregiving, unemployment, a single starving human, and eating meat.
Yeah, that's the list.
According to Vethathirium, these aren't just unfortunate realities. These are the active ingredients of war.
The text asks directly, as long as these conditions persist, can there be permanent peace? And the implied answer is a resounding no.
So this is the bedrock of the entire manifesto. The 14 principles we are about to explore are the systematic dismantling of those 7 conditions.
Exactly.
So let's start tearing down those walls. The first section of these 14 principles focuses on literally redrawing the map of the world, tackling borders, resources, and macroeconomics. Let's look at principles 1 and 4.
Right, which is advocate for a warless world governed by a single entity.
So what's the argument here?
Well, the argument is grounded in a brutally simple natural observation. The text points out that we all live on the exact same soil. We all breathe the same life-saving air.
The same sun shines on everyone. The same oceans evaporate to produce rain.
Right. And the critical philosophical leap the text makes is recognizing that no human being currently alive created the land, the air, the sun, or the water.
We didn't build the house. We just moved in.
We just moved in, yet we expend massive amounts of global energy, capital, and blood claiming exclusive ownership over these uncreatable resources.
And the ultimate result of claiming ownership over the uncreatable is war.
Exactly. The text asks the reader to really pause and consider the sheer magnitude of loss caused by warfare resources, limbs, lives, entire generations.
That's devastating.
And it posits a very dark hypothetical. It says, if it's considered justice for one group to kill another to survive, then eventually the only people left on Earth will be the murderers.
God, it's a mathematical race to the bottom. So the diagnosis is clear. Borders cause resource hoarding, which causes war, which is suicidal. But what is the actual proposed solution?
Right, because you can't just release a manifesto asking everyone to please put their guns down.
Exactly. There has to be a mechanism.
The mechanism proposed in Principles 1 and 4 is the empowerment of the United Nations.
The UN.
Yeah. The text envisions taking this existing framework and giving it supreme, overriding global authority. The mandate is for all nations to surrender their border security and defense capabilities entirely to a Security Council within this one world UN.
Okay, let me push back on this because the logistics of this are mind-bending.
Yeah.
Are we talking about instantly dissolving the United States military, the Chinese military, the Russian military?
What word proposes, yes.
Evaporating millions of defense jobs and turning off the global military-industrial complex overnight? I mean, if you just rip that Band-Aid off, the global economy would go into a freefall.
Well, the author actually anticipates that exact logistical nightmare. The text doesn't advocate for an overnight vacuum.
Okay, so there's a transition phase.
Yes. It outlines a very specific 15-year transition plan. The strategy is built on a massive reallocation of capital and human energy.
Reallocation how?
The proposal is to take the trillions of dollars currently spent on weapons, defense contracts, and standing armies, and redirect that capital entirely into global development and welfare, managed by this empowered UN.
But how does that look on the ground, though? Like, what happens to the soldier whose base just got decommissioned?
The manpower transitions as well. The soldiers themselves, the engineers, the logistics experts, they are transformed into service forces.
Service forces.
Yeah. Instead of deploying to fight a war, that exact same organized manpower is deployed to develop struggling regions, build infrastructure, and uplift marginalized populations.
Wow.
And the text makes a staggering claim here. It says that by redirecting all military spending and energy into public welfare, every single country could achieve equal economic prosperity and live in peace within just 15 years.
15 years. I mean, historically speaking, that's a fraction of a generation.
It's incredibly fast.
The idea that we could go from a fractured, heavily armed globe to total planetary equity in a decade and a half simply by moving the defense budget to the welfare budget is a wildly optimistic timeline.
Very optimistic, yeah.
But it does highlight a painful truth.
Yeah.
You know, the resources to solve global poverty already exist on the balance sheets. They are just currently being spent on building things designed to explode.
That is the core economic realization of the philosophy. The scarcity isn't real. The allocation is just currently optimized for violence rather than thriving.
Right. So, okay, we have a one-world government. The armies are transitioned into engineering corps. The defense budget is now the human thriving budget.
Yes.
But you can have all the peace treaties in the world, and if half the globe is dying of thirst because they happen to live in a desert, you don't have peace.
Exactly.
Which brings us to Principle 13, which is the socialization of food and water.
Right. So Principle 13 recognizes that resources are not distributed evenly by nature. The text notes the massive global population, over 7 billion people, and reiterates that just as sunlight hits everyone, every human has a fundamental birthright to food, water, and shelter.
But nature didn't get that memo. You have major river systems overflowing and causing catastrophic floods in one hemisphere, while another continent is in a decade-long drought.
Right. Geography isn't fair.
So how does a one-world government fix a geological unfairness?
Through the largest infrastructure megaproject in the history of the species.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Under the guidance of this unbiased global administration, the world's experts would be tasked with linking all the major rivers in the world.
Building a planetary cardiovascular system?
That analogy captures the scale perfectly.
If you think about it, a flood is just high blood pressure in one artery, and a drought is a blockage in another. If humanity isn't restricted by invisible political borders, we can physically plumb the earth. We can build the veins, the canals, the aqueducts to pump the lifeblood of water from where it is destroying communities to where it can grow crops.
The logic asserts that by achieving this global water distribution, you immediately eradicate drinking water shortages and massively boost global food production.
It makes sense on paper.
And the text emphasizes that this is only possible if unbiased experts are calling the shots. If you have nationalistic leaders, they will just hoard the water. A one-world government allows for planetary-scale engineering.
It envisions humanity finally acting like the custodians of a single unified farm.
Exactly.
But let's zoom in from the macroeconomics. We've plumbed the rivers, we've abolished the militaries. But what about the individual? What about my daily life and my ability to feed my family?
All right, the micro level.
Yeah. Principle 2 dives into economic justice and completely redefines the concept of money.
Principle 2 takes a hard look at how we measure human value. It strips away all the complexity of modern finance and states. Very simply, money is a token of labor.
A token of labor. Let's really dig into that.
The concept argues that money shouldn't be an abstract commodity that can be manipulated, shorted on a stock exchange, or hoarded to create artificial scarcity.
Like it is today.
Exactly. It is merely a physical representation of human effort. When you expend physical or intellectual energy to benefit society, you receive a token acknowledging that expenditure.
I want you, the listener, to think about your own paycheck right now. What if your salary didn't represent market scarcity or corporate profit margins, or what an algorithm decided your role was worth?
Right. What if it was just about effort?
Yeah. What if it strictly represented your caloric and intellectual output? The philosophy argues that this reframing changes the entire power dynamic of employment.
It absolutely does. And the text mandates two major policies based on this reframing.
What's the first one?
First, wages. The text insists that the tokens a person earns for their labor must be sufficient to fully support not just the worker, but their family members as well.
So a living wage, essentially,
Yes. A single income must guarantee a dignified life for a household.
which instantly outlaws the modern reality where a person has to work 3 gig economy jobs just to afford rent and basic groceries.
Yeah, the philosophy views that as structural violence.
Wow. And the second mandate?
The second mandate pushes the safety net even further. The government must guarantee a livelihood for those who cannot work due to age, illness, or disability. The system must eradicate the exploitation of one person's labor by another.
And it specifically calls out the exploitation by rulers and administrators, doesn't it?
Yes, it really does. The text notes that the tendency to snatch the fruits of someone else's labor is highly prevalent among those in power. By redefining money purely as a token of labor and guaranteeing everyone's basic needs, you remove the leverage that allows rulers to exploit the working class. Everyone who can work must be given the opportunity, and everyone must be provided for.
Okay, let's take a breath. Section 1 of this blueprint is staggering in its logistical scope. We've dissolved national borders, we've handed security to a unified UN, we're building a global aqueduct system, and we've instituted a universal basic needs economy based on labor tokens.
It's a completely new world.
The physical and economic architecture of the world is sorted.
But physical architecture is only half the battle.
Exactly. Because human beings aren't just water and dirt, we are behavior. We carry trauma. We have egos.
Lots of egos.
Right. If you put perfect plumbing in a house full of angry, resentful people, they will still burn the house down. You can't just change the map, you have to rewrite the social contract.
Yes, the software running the hardware.
Exactly. So how does Vethathirium redesign the rules of human behavior?
This transition leads us into the second major theme of the text: justice, culture, and fundamental respect. Principle 3 starts this behavioral overhaul by addressing the justice system.
Okay.
And it takes a profoundly unique stance on crime and punishment.
Specifically, it launches a devastating critique of the death penalty. But it doesn't use the typical arguments about cruel and unusual punishment or the sanctity of the criminal's life.
No, it approaches it from a completely different angle.
What's the angle?
The foundational view of justice in this text is absolute. It states that while it is an error if a guilty person escapes due to a lack of evidence, it is an absolute travesty for an innocent person to be punished.
We know that legal philosophy, better 100 guilty men go free than one innocent suffer.
Right.
But how does it apply that to capital punishment?
It shifts the camera away from the execution chamber and points it at the criminal's family.
Oh, well.
The text poses a grim scenario. A person commits a murder, and a highly educated judge sentences that person to hang. The execution happens. But look at the aftermath.
What happens to the family?
Exactly. The murderer's innocent spouse, their children, their aging parents are left behind in a state of immense agony, social stigma, and economic ruin.
And the text asks a haunting question, right? What crime did the family commit?
Yes. The philosophy argues that answering a murder committed by an ignorant or desperate person with a cold, calculated killing ordered by the state is not justice. It is simply compounding trauma.
It victimizes innocent bystanders.
The text effectively calls the execution itself a murder, just one dressed up in legal robes.
It's focusing on the collateral damage of revenge. I want to ask the listener to really apply that lens to their own life. When you feel wronged, when you seek retribution, how often does your revenge splash onto the innocent people surrounding the person who hurt you?
That's a deep question.
The text argues that state-sanctioned revenge is a blunt instrument that just crushes families. But it goes even deeper into society's culpability regarding crime itself, doesn't it?
This is perhaps the most radical systemic critique in the entire document.
Okay, let's hear it.
The text argues that criminals are not born in a vacuum. If a person turns to crime, we are obligated to look at the environmental soil they grew in.
Right, the conditions.
If society has failed to provide adequate employment, basic needs, and a supportive environment, if society forces a person into such a state of desperation that they commit a crime just to survive, then society itself is complicit.
So the society is a criminal.
Yes. Punishing the individual without fixing the societal conditions that manufactured their desperation is the ultimate hypocrisy.
That is heavy.
True justice, according to Principle 3, isn't about building a better guillotine. It requires wise people creating equitable laws and a government executing them so flawlessly that the desperation causing crime never arises in the first place.
Wow. So laws and justice deal with what happens when things go wrong. But what about the baseline culture?
Right, everyday life.
Yeah, what are the daily rules of engagement for a peaceful society? Principle 5 outlines a completely reformed culture.
Principle 5 argues that we cannot rely on the inertia of ancient traditions. It acknowledges that our ancestors created customs to regulate behavior in their time, but it insists that the world has changed.
The software running human society needs a massive update to be universally applicable today.
Exactly. And it breaks this new cultural software down into a very clear list.
Yeah, the 4 things we must abolish and the 5 duties we must adopt. The 4 no's and the 5 yeses.
Let's look at the no's first.
Okay, the text says, a peaceful society must absolutely eradicate 4 things: drugs, war, lying, and smoking tobacco.
It metaphorically compares avoiding these 4 things to building a boundary wall around a house.
Yeah.
They are the protective perimeter required for a disciplined, peaceful life.
Okay, looking at that list, war, lying, drugs, and smoking.
Yeah, smoking is in there.
I mean, 3 of those feel like massive moral imperatives that alter the fabric of society, and then smoking feels like a public health PSA slipped in at the end. Why does smoking get elevated to the same level of moral failing as war?
It reveals how intimately this philosophy connects the macro to the micro. In Vethathirium, physical health and mental clarity are not just personal choices.
What are they?
They are prerequisites for societal peace. You cannot have a harmonious global community if the individuals comprising it are actively, willfully poisoning their own physical bodies or clouding their minds.
So self-harm is viewed as a disruption of the natural order.
Exactly.
Okay, so those are the walls, the behaviors we exclude. What are the 5 moral duties we actively cultivate inside those walls?
The 5 duties are laid out sequentially. Duty number 1, living by one's own labor and intellect. You must contribute your token of labor to the system.
No exploiting others, no freeloading, check. What's next?
Duty number 2 is a pledge of nonviolence, not hurting others mentally or physically. This applies to both action and thought.
A high bar, but necessary for peace. Number 3.
Duty number 3 connects back to the preamble, not killing for food. It frames a vegetarian lifestyle not just as a dietary choice, but as a moral imperative to expand the circle of compassion beyond our own species.
Got it. Duty number 4.
Respecting others, property, and freedom, even in a world where natural resources like water are socialized, personal boundaries and individual liberty are still paramount.
And the final duty.
Duty number 5 moves from passive restraint to proactive engagement. It is the duty of actively showing love to relieve the suffering of others to the absolute best of your ability.
So it is not enough to just sit quietly and do no harm.
No, you must actively engage in healing the world around you.
Work hard, don't hurt anyone, don't eat animals, respect boundaries, and actively help those who are suffering. It is an airtight, remarkably pragmatic, ethical framework.
It is very cohesive.
But the text doesn't just stick to broad, platitudes. It gets incredibly specific about systemic power dynamics, particularly regarding gender. Let's delve into Principle 7, the respect for womanhood.
Principle 7 is a profound pillar of this entire philosophy. The core argument here is a demand for deep structural reverence for women.
Reverence, not just equality.
Yes. The text describes womanhood as the marvelous channel designed by the divine for all life to enter this world. Furthermore, it explicitly acknowledges that women are the unseen backbone of every man's success.
It specifically calls out the massive unpaid labor force of managing homes, raising children, and caring for elders.
The vital infrastructure of society that traditional economics completely ignores.
Right. The text argues that despite progressive thinkers advocating for equality, society at large still systemically treats women as second-class citizens.
Yeah.
Vethathirium demands a complete and utter reversal of this paradigm.
And to justify this, it uses a piece of mathematical philosophy that I find absolutely fascinating.
Okay, let's hear the math.
It points out a biological reality. There are over 7 billion people on Earth. Roughly half of them are men. And every single one of those billions of men was grown inside and birthed by a woman.
The math checks out.
The conclusion the text draws from this simple math is striking. It states, and I'm quoting here, "Therefore, all men are essentially a gift from women."
Men are a gift from women. I want to really linger on that for a second, because if you truly internalize that logic, it short-circuits the entire psychological foundation of the patriarchy.
It really does.
How can a man claim inherent dominance or superiority over the very entity that literally manufactured his physical form and gifted him to the world?
It is a philosophical argument designed to completely humble the male ego on a global scale. It removes the illusion of male self-sufficiency.
And the solution proposed in Principle 7 isn't just nice rhetoric, right?
No, it demands systemic action. The text insists that women must achieve total elevation in education, economic power, and access to all life resources.
So empowering women in every sphere isn't framed as a favor.
Right. It is an absolute necessity for the survival and improvement of the entire human family.
So we've dismantled the defense industry, replumbed the earth, redefined the justice system, and philosophically dismantled the patriarchy. We are dealing with heavy, macro-level societal structures here.
Very heavy.
But as we move into Section 3 of this deep dive, the text takes a sharp turn. It addresses something incredibly specific, highly controversial, and honestly, almost jarring in its bluntness.
You are referring to Principle 10?
I am. Let's talk about Principle 10, because the text decrees, with absolute seriousness, that sports are strictly for children.
It is arguably the most surprising and specific mandate in the entire 14-point manifesto.
Let's explore the nuance here, because it doesn't hate physical activity, right?
No, not at all. The text insists that sports are vital for children. It lists climbing, jumping, bending, swimming, running. It argues that kids desperately need this for their physical and mental development.
The observation of childhood in this text is actually quite tragic, though.
It is. It laments that modern children are crushed by the stress of their academic studies. They suffer from anxiety and depression because they are denied the time to engage in pure, joyful physical play.
It urges governments and parents to let children play. So it is fiercely pro-play for the youth. But for adults, the text argues that once you reach adulthood, you should completely, unequivocally stop playing and watching sports. A total ban.
Yep.
Why? How does a manifesto about world peace subtly declare war on the Olympics and Sunday Night Football?
To understand the ban, we have to look at the historical context the author provides. The text explains that historically, adult physical sports were not entertainment.
What were they?
They were training. They were preparations for frequent, brutal wars with neighboring tribes or for fighting off wild animals. Adult sports are, at their core, simulated combat.
Okay, follow the logic. In this 14-point utopia, we've used the UN to abolish all wars, and we aren't fighting off saber-toothed tigers anymore.
Right.
Therefore, the training simulation is obsolete.
Exactly. But it goes further than just calling them obsolete. The text argues that in the modern civilized world, adult sports are actively destructive to the human psyche.
Destructive how?
They artificially breed rivalry, they create enmity, they generate virulent, violent tribalism among groups, cities, and nations.
It manufactures an us versus them mentality out of thin air.
Yeah.
You put on a red shirt, the other guy puts on a blue shirt, and suddenly the blue shirt is your mortal enemy for the next 3 hours.
Exactly. It allows the darkest parts of human tribalism to flourish under the guise of a game.
And if your ultimate planetary goal is the eradication of borders and the realization that humanity is one single unified family, you cannot permit systems that artificially divide people into competing, hateful factions over the movement of a ball.
The text even drops a famously cynical quote to hammer this point home. It quotes an unnamed Western scholar observing an adult sports match who said, 11 fools play, 11,000 fools watch.
Wow. It is highly provocative, but it perfectly encapsulates the text's disdain for this spectacle of modern athletics.
It views massive stadiums filled with screaming adults as a tragic waste of human energy and emotion that only serves to reinforce division and aggression.
I can just imagine the sheer cultural riot. If a government actually tried to shut down the Premier League or the NFL based on this principle.
It would be chaos.
But within the strict internal logic of Vethathirium, it holds up perfectly. No war means no need to play war games.
Right.
But from the highly terrestrial issue of soccer games, Principle 12 takes us in the opposite direction. It pivots from sociology to cosmology.
Yes, Principle 12 transitions into an explanation of magnetism. It provides the underlying physics and cosmology of the universe according to this philosophical framework.
Walk me through this physics lesson, because it gets incredibly deep very fast.
The text describes a universe built on a single, continuous, formless force. It begins with what it calls divine space, or the Almighty.
Okay.
Crucially, this space is not an empty vacuum. It possesses an inherent, omnipresent pressure. It compresses itself.
Like a cosmic vice grip squeezing in from all directions.
Yes. And through this relentless self-compression, the formless space creates what the text calls divine particles. Because of the continuous pressure squeezing them, these particles begin to spin.
Spinning particles.
This intense self-rotation causes them to combine, and these combinations form the physical matter of the universe, the stars, the planets, the galaxies.
Yeah, okay, space squeezes into particles, spinning particles clump into stars. That tracks with a poetic interpretation of astrophysics. But where does the concept of magnetism come in?
As these particles, these massive energy centers spin at unimaginable speeds, some of them cannot withstand the rotational force.
They break apart.
They fragment. Excess particles fly off, ejected from the spinning mass. When these ejected particles crash back into the surrounding friction of the divine space, they lose their state as solid particles and transform into a wave.
Okay, I follow.
That resulting continuous wave of energy permeating the cosmos is what the text defines as magnetism.
Magnetism. But to be clear, we aren't talking about the polarized metal that holds a grocery list to a refrigerator.
Not at all. In this philosophy, magnetism is the universal energy wave that permeates absolutely everything. It is the connective tissue of reality.
It's like the universal operating system. The text says it guides the entire physical universe. But how does this connect to humanity?
This is where the philosophy makes a massive leap. The text asserts that this exact same universal magnetism, the energy generated by spinning stars, manifests in the physical world as the five elements. But in biological living beings, it manifests as the five senses.
Wait, the five senses are made of cosmic magnetism. Explain the mechanics of that. How do we get from a star throwing off energy to my tongue tasting a strawberry?
The text suggests that biological evolution is essentially the localized capture and processing of that universal wave. When that magnetic wave interacts with the biological receptors of a human body, it is translated into sensation.
Which one specifically?
The text explicitly lists them: pressure or touch, sound, smell, light or sight, and taste. All of these sensory experiences, our feelings of pleasure and pain, and even the mind itself, are described as illusions of magnetism.
So the exact same cosmic force generated in the void of space is the force allowing my brain to process a thought right now. The mind and the universe are running on the exact same operating system.
That is the core assertion of Principle 12. It inextricably links the macrocosm of the universe to the microcosm of human consciousness. You are not separate from the universe. You are a localized sensory expression of its magnetism.
And if the human mind and the universe are governed by the exact same physics, that has massive, inescapable implications for human morality, doesn't it?
It changes everything.
Which brings us to Principles 11 and 6, where the text links this cosmic magnetism to the concept of cause and effect, or karma, completely bypassing the traditional concepts of heaven and hell.
This is the vital philosophical bridge of the manifesto. It states that God is not a personified being sitting on a throne keeping a tally of your sins.
Right.
Instead, God is simply the infallible, unalterable law of cause and effect. It is a system of absolute mathematical order.
The physics of morale.
Precisely. If you perform good actions, using your body and your magnetic senses thoughtfully to help others, you receive good results, pleasure.
And the reverse.
If you perform bad or careless actions, you disrupt the magnetic order and you receive bad results, pain. The text insists that looking up at the sky and blaming God for your suffering is pure ignorance, because your suffering is merely the mathematical output of your own behavioral input.
But wait, almost every major world religion uses the concepts of heaven and hell to enforce moral behavior. If God is just physics, what does this text say about those concepts?
The text provides a fascinating, almost anthropological origin story for religion. It claims that ancient wise men, deep thinkers who actually understood this abstract physics of cause and effect, realized they had a massive communication problem.
A communication problem.
Yeah, the general masses of ancient, uneducated people could not grasp the complex logic of cosmic magnetism and karmic input-output.
Right, you couldn't pull a farmer aside 3,000 years ago, explain quantum moral physics, and expect it to change his behavior.
Exactly. So according to the text, these wise men invented a necessary fiction. They created the concept of a god with a human form, and they invented the concepts of heaven and hell.
Nice.
It was a civic tool. They used the glittering promise of heaven to bribe people into good behavior and the fiery terror of hell to scare violent rule breakers into compliance.
So heaven and hell were basically invented as psychological training wheels for early humanity's moral development.
That is the exact argument. It was a pragmatic invention by compassionate thinkers to maintain societal order. But the text argues that humanity is now in the modern era. We have outgrown the training wheels.
We need to graduate from the fairy tale and understand the actual mechanics of our actions.
And it brings in some heavy intellectual hitters to back this up, bridging poetry and modern physics.
Oh, like who?
It references two specific quotes to solidify this idea of inescapable cause and effect. First, the ancient Tamil poet Kanyan Punaguranar, who wrote the profound line, "Good and evil do not come from others."
Meaning you, and you alone, are the author of your fate. You generate your own karma.
And second, it quotes Albert Einstein's third law of motion, "For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction."
Merging poetry and physics.
Yes, it merges ancient poetic wisdom with modern physics to say the universe keeps a perfect ledger, the magnetism balances itself. You cannot escape the consequences of your actions through prayer or ritual.
Which brings us to the final section of our deep dive. If heaven and hell were just civic training wheels, and God is actually the infallible physics of cause and effect, what does this text say we should do with modern religion?
It has a very clear answer for that.
Because you can't drop a philosophical bomb calling religious dogma a necessary fiction and just walk away. Section 4 tackles rethinking God and religion entirely through principles 8, 9, and 14. Let's start with principle 8, living by divine justice. How are we supposed to view the divine now?
Principle 8 explicitly asks humanity to strip away the personification. It defines the divine as the almighty nature, the omnipresent energy that we just discussed.
The invisible, vibrating machinery of reality.
Yes, and the text gives highly concrete biological examples. It says, this divine energy is the force that digests the food in your stomach every single day, miraculously turning a piece of bread into living human tissue.
Right.
It's the force moving the planets in flawless order. And crucially, it operates within every single one of us as pure consciousness, constantly monitoring and reacting to our actions.
So living by divine justice means recognizing that you are literally made of and surrounded by this infallible system. You can't cheat it.
Nope.
But if the divine is an omnipresent energy digesting our food, the text has some major structural problems with how we currently practice religion, doesn't it? Principle 9 goes on the offensive against idol rituals and chariot festivals.
Principle 9 is a sharp satirical critique of modern religious practices. The author points out the sheer absurdity from the perspective of universal physics of giving the divine energy human physical attributes.
Right. We gave a formless cosmic pressure, eyes, ears, and a nose. We wrote sprawling soap operas about gods having families, getting angry, getting jealous.
And then the text notes, we take a piece of stone, carve it into a statue representing this god, lock it inside a dark, unventilated room in a temple, and close the door.
And then we feed it.
Exactly. Human beings bring this statue food, milk, ghee, coconuts, fruits to satisfy its hunger.
Let's unpack the logic of the counterargument here. Why is the author so dismissive of this?
The logic is brutally straightforward. The creator of the vast cosmos, the energy managing billions of spinning galaxies, does not possess a physical human body. Therefore, this creator does not have a stomach.
It doesn't get hungry.
And it certainly doesn't require humans to feed it coconuts.
The text actually calls these rituals child's play.
It does. It acknowledges that, millennia ago, these rituals might have served a purpose to gather communities and instill basic discipline, but it argues that the original purpose has completely evaporated.
So what are they now?
Today, these rituals have devolved into child's play that is heavily exploited.
Exploited by whom?
By selfish individuals and merchants. The text argues that massive religious events like massive chariot festivals cause immense financial waste for the working class.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, instead of uniting people, these rituals often become tribal flashpoints for societal fighting and division. The text urgently pleads with humanity to outgrow these practices and focus on the true, formless nature of the divine.
Which brings us to the grand finale of Vethathirium, Principle 14, the ultimate plan to choose one truth and end the religious divide forever.
Principle 14 is the synthesis of the entire manifesto. It begins by stating its final thesis: religions were originally created by deep thinkers as tools to elevate humans above their base animalistic instincts.
But the tools became weapons.
Exactly. The text argues that due to centuries of human selfishness, greed, and the accumulation of negative karmic imprints, these religions have lost their way.
They're broke.
Instead of elevating humanity, Religions now fight violently against one another. The very systems designed to build human culture are actively destroying it. People view their neighbors as mortal enemies simply because they belong to a different theological tribe.
So what is the solution? Because you cannot simply announce to billions of people that their deeply held religious dogma is child's play and expect them to smile, agree, and hold hands.
The solution proposed is what we might call the ultimate summit.
Okay.
The text demands that all the religious leaders of the world, the individuals who are highly educated and supposedly understand the true, deep nature of spiritual reality, must physically gather in one room.
Just lock the Pope, the Dalai Lama, the Grand Ayatollah, the chief rabbis, everyone in a massive conference room.
Essentially, yes. And the strict mandate for this summit is that they must check their egos, their historical grievances, and their worldly attachments at the door.
Good luck with that.
Right. But they must engage in a completely objective, scientific, and spiritual dialogue to answer a single unifying question. Is the divine state one, or is it many?
And the text assumes the logical conclusion they will inevitably arrive at is one.
Yes. The expectation is that by stripping away the cultural stories, the localized myths, and the invented rituals, these leaders will collectively agree on the single, unified, formless, true nature of the divine energy, the universal magnetism.
And once the religious leaders of the world sign off on this one truth, what happens next? How does that change the world?
The goal is for these leaders to then take this single unified truth back to their massive global flocks. By teaching the entire world this one reality that we are all operating under the exact same universal law of cause and effect, governed by the exact same physics lex, humanity will finally lose the rationale for religious warfare.
If everyone on Earth realizes they are playing by the exact same cosmic rules, the justification for holy war just evaporates.
That is the text's ultimate argument. This unification of spiritual understanding is the final necessary capstone.
It ties it all together.
Once humanity cooperates on this fundamental spiritual level, they can finally execute the massive logistical improvements, the UN transition, the river linking, the economic justice, and achieve the permanent world peace discussed in the first 13 principles. It is a complete closed-loop system.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an astronomical amount of ground today. Let's do a thematic recap of this journey we just went on, because the sheer scale of this blueprint is breathtaking.
We started by identifying the diseases of society, tearing down physical borders, and the concept of private land ownership.
We envisioned handing global security to a unified UN and redirecting trillions in military spending to create a 15-year timeline for global prosperity.
We physically plumbed the earth, linking every river to socialize water and food. We redefined the very concept of money, turning it purely into a token of labor to ensure everyone's basic needs are met and exploitation is eradicated.
We fundamentally altered the justice system, dismantling the death penalty by recognizing the devastating collateral damage inflicted on innocent families, and argued that a society failing to provide for its people is the true criminal.
We outlined a brand new universal culture, eradicating drugs, war, lying, and smoking, while adopting a strict commitment to labor, nonviolence, vegetarianism, and proactive love.
We demanded the total systemic elevation of women, recognizing them through basic biological mathematics as the source of all humanity. And, shockingly, we abolished adult sports to curb the artificial tribalism of simulated war.
We explored the cosmic physics of magnetism, learning that the spinning stars and our own physical senses operate on the exact same continuous energy wave. We realized that heaven and hell were just ancient fictions designed to teach the very real, inescapable physics of cause and effect.
And finally, we called for an end to idol worship and the convening of a global summit of religious leaders to agree on one universal truth, ending religious conflict forever.
From tearing down physical borders to tearing down religious borders, Vethathirium argues that humanity's survival depends entirely on recognizing our shared resources and the unbreakable laws of the universe.
But as we close, the most important part of this analysis is how it applies to you, the listener. How might you take this massive macro philosophy and apply it to your micro life?
Yeah, even if we don't have a one-world government tomorrow, and even if we don't link all the rivers next week, the principles here are immediately useful.
How can understanding money as just a token of labor change your relationship with your career, your self-worth, and consumerism?
How can recognizing the collateral damage of revenge, the way the text views the death penalty, change the way you handle conflicts and forgiveness in your own community today? The philosophy asks us to look deeply at the ripples our actions cause.
It really does. It forces you to look at the massive, seemingly permanent scaffolding of society and realize that humans built it, which means humans can rebuild it. But I want to leave you with a final lingering thought. A provocative question that the text itself doesn't explicitly answer, but one that this entire blueprint forces us to confront.
What is that?
Well, let's say this blueprint is entirely logical. Let's assume that linking the rivers, abolishing borders, instituting labor tokens, and acknowledging one universal law of physics would actually solve all of our logistical and resource problems.
Okay.
If that is true, is the real barrier to world peace not a lack of resources, but rather human psychology's deep-seated addiction to conflict?
Oh, wow.
Are we, on a subconscious evolutionary level, simply afraid of a world where we don't have an enemy to push against? If the diagnostic scan is clear and the cure is sitting right there on the table, why do we collectively refuse to take the medicine?
That is a profound question. If the architectural blueprint is perfect, the flaw must reside within the builders themselves.
Something to mull over on your commute. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. It's been an incredibly dense, fascinating journey, and we appreciate you taking the time to explore these radical, challenging ideas with us. Keep questioning the systems around you, and most importantly, stay curious.